So far with Invisible Ink, we had a look inside the box, and we had a look at the actual game itself. Now, let's look at some of the creative minds behind the game. Let's start with Alex Garden. Alex Garden had started or co-founded several companies before taking up management positions with Microsoft Game Studios in October of 2009. These companies included Nexon's North American game publishing studio, which released Mabinogi Heroes under the name Vindictus in March 2010. IBLE Systems, a parking management systems company which had developed a touchscreen ticket printing console with Klei in 2005. And Relic Entertainment, a real-time strategy game developer and the starting point of what is to become Invisible Ink. Normally, one wouldn't think of Canada as a hotbed of games publishers. Indeed, the top game-producing nations in the world are America, Japan, Britain, Germany, and France, and then Canada. However, some of the best-known games developers are located in Canada. Edmonton's BioWare, for example, developed role-playing game fantasies such as Baldur's Gate and Neverwinter Nights. Montreal's studio of France-based Ubisoft has produced Tom Clancy's Splinter Cell games. And the biggest name of them all, Electronic Arts Canada, based in Vancouver, has focused its games production on EA's famous sports franchises. It was in Vancouver on 1997 that Alex Garden, who, at this time, was based in Vancouver, and Luke Molyneux, who was born in Nova Scotia and was the lead programmer of the first two games of the Homeworld series, who together co-founded Vancouver-based game developer Relic Entertainment. Alex would go on to become the CEO of Relic Entertainment. Relic specializes in PC real-time strategy games and is probably best known for three games: Homeworld, Warhammer 40,000 Dawn of War, and Company of Heroes. It is the game Warhammer 40,000 that we will focus on. Warhammer 40k Dawn of War is a military science fiction RTS developed by Relic and based on Games Workshop's popular tabletop wargame of Warhammer 40,000. The director of the RTS is Alex Garden and had a team of designers which included Andrew Chambers, who went on to be the story writer and designer for Homeworld, the Remastered Collection, Jay Wilson, who went on to work on Diablo III, only to leave the games industry altogether and fall back on his original passion of writing, all of which is a story unto itself. And finally, Chris Degnan, who would become the senior game designer of Destiny 2 and lead AI designer of Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy. The AI engine of Dawn of War was programmed by Jamie Cheng, who had also programmed the AI for The Outfit, a game for the Xbox 360. Jamie Cheng will become a central key figure in the development and release of Invisible Ink. So what is 40k Dawn of War? According to Wikipedia, the plot is set in a dystopian vision of the far future. Humanity has established an empire that spans the entire galaxy, known as the Imperium of Man. The Imperium is in a constant state of war with the Orcs, Eldar, and human servants of chaos, desperately fighting to preserve the human race from extinction. A single-player campaign of this game is centered around the planet of Tartarus. The game on a whole was a success, scoring 87% according to Games Rankings based upon 65 reviews, and 86% based on 51 reviews on Metacritic. The praise was given to the game's multiple units and factions, the high quality of animation, a polished presentation, and the interface. However, there were two areas of the game that had drawn criticism. First of these was the single-player campaign, which reviewers have found to be too short and not all that challenging. The other was the lack of original gameplay. Still, the criticism was considered to be minor. Sure, the gameplay was not original, but it doesn't really matter. Especially when the whole of the game, to quote IGN, was a great piece of entertainment. Dawn of War was released just after Relic was acquired by THQ on September of 2004. This was when Relic Entertainment became THQ Canada. The game has spawned 3 expansion packs and 2 sequels. 1 year after the release of Warhammer 40k Dawn of War, the man who had designed the game's AI, Jamie Cheng, had parted ways with the company. With the help of Alex Garden, Jamie would co-found the Klei Entertainment games development studio in Vancouver. Jamie would acquire seed funding for the new company by selling his shares earned at Relic and by getting a $10,000 loan from his brother. At the beginning, Jamie had a small workforce of 11 employees in 2009, which had grown to about 35 employees in May of 2013. The August 2010 release of SHANK almost spelt the end of Klei Entertainment.
SHANK was kind of in limbo for a while. We were self-funding, and then PAX hit. Everybody loved SHANK, and that's when EA just wanted in. Before we had signed it, we were basically out of money. When we showed that demo, we basically showed all that we had. And that was 2 levels. We needed to finish 15 levels, including co-op, which we hadn't started yet. And we needed to finish all of that in like 2 months. It was the worst time of my life. That was the worst time. Every year there's been a few months where I'd come home for weeks at a time and Irene's already asleep. It was like, yeah, I need to make it work so that this doesn't happen. I never really wanted to stay at work till 2 a.m., whether or not there was a baby, I don't know. But it sure was an incentive to make sure it worked.
It would be very hard if he was still doing the 60, 70-hour weeks and I was alone at home with a baby all the time.
It really had not occurred to me just how much of a time's crunch the game industry really has, and what kind of sacrifices programmers needed to make, at least in regards to raising a family. So for me, this is really cool. Why not let the game's programmers leave the office at a more reasonable time, so that they can spend the time raising a family? Well, as long as the said company is still producing games. In January 2014, after 2.5 years of development, with about 10 members on the core team, Invisible, Inc. would finally be released. It would see release on Windows, the Macintosh, and Linux platforms, as well as PlayStation 4 and iOS. It would also receive a physical release through IndieBox. 3 of the developers of Invisible, Inc. include James Lance, Jason Dreger, and Chris Costa. James is the technical designer of Invisible, Inc. and had gotten his start with the company Loop Drop before working with Klei. He got his feet wet in quest design before taking on the role of lead designer of an unannounced social game. Jason actually started out as an English teacher in Japan for 6 years before working with Klei, and Chris had worked as a junior programmer with Relic Entertainment. In fact, Chris was credited as being a programmer in Warhammer 40,000 Dawn of War. In the last video, I had stated that Invisible, Inc. was a turn-based tactical game, kind of reminding me of the Civ 4 game with an atmosphere kind of like Max Headroom. Not surprising, I was completely wrong. According to James Lance, the style of the game was inspired both by classic cyberpunk along the lines of Neuromancer and Blade Runner, and the 1950s and 60s spy movies. The design of the game was strongly inspired by some of the team's favorite games over the last decade. These include XCOM, FTL, and Spelunky. Jason would say that Invisible, Inc. had a bit of Ocean's 11 and James Bond in the tone, featuring slick, cool spies who are confident and sometimes a little cheeky. Jason would also say, as a joke, if FTL and XCOM had a baby, and that baby was raised by Mark of a Ninja, and watched nothing but Shadowrun on TV, the end result would be Invisible, Inc. Jason has also stated in a few interviews that they had wanted to create something that was like Bullfrog's hit game, Syndicate. In any case, the team felt that it was necessary that Invisible, Inc. must have a time pressure mechanic. They believed that this mechanic would help the player build better long-term decisions throughout each game, and make players create trade-offs with each move. IGN had given Invisible, Inc. a rating of 8.5, with a criticism on a story that doesn't really change no matter what decision you make. Still, it was challenging and randomized enough that the replay value was pretty high. So where is everyone these days? Alex Garden is enterprising as ever. He is currently acting as advisor to 2 companies in India, 2 companies in the San Francisco Bay Area, a venture partner for Signalfire, and as chairman and CEO of Zoom Pizza. Zoom Pizza, by the way, is a pizza delivery service run by robots. As mentioned before, Relic Entertainment is still operational and operating in Vancouver. THQ had sold Relic to Sega on January of 2013. The third part of Warhammer 40k Dawn of War and the fourth part of the Age of Empires, recently published by Microsoft, will be due from Relic soon. As of this date, Klei Entertainment currently has 3 upcoming games: Hot Lava, a first-person adventure game; Oxygen not included, a simulation game; and Grifflands. Jamie Cheng is still with Klei Entertainment, having finished producing Klei's 2016 game, Don't Starve Together, and one of the expansions, Don't Starve Shipwrecked. This has been a look at Invisible, Inc., and this concludes the 3-part series of Invisible, Inc. I'm looking forward to the next part of the IndieBox series, and thank you for watching.